Welcome back to another episode of The Road Chose Me, and I'm out exploring again in the mountains of BC, and I'm trying to get over one of the famous passes here, and I'm up at about 1,500 meters, and not surprisingly I've just hit snow here on the trail, so this is as far as I'm going to get. So what I think is I'm going to head back down a bit and I'll find somewhere to camp, and what I'm going to show you on today's episode is what I cook for a typical meal when I'm out, and what those typical meals were while I was in Central and South America and while I drove all the way around Africa. People always ask about that. So food is today's video. I'll show you my kitchen setup, I'll show you my fridge, and I'll show you how I keep it simple and how I'm able to cook the food that I do while I'm out on the road. But in the meantime, have a look at this. I just had a little bit of a go trying to get up here, and I don't know how long this goes on for. The map shows maybe I'm just a couple of kilometers from the pass. So, I mean, maybe if I came here in the morning when the snow was really firm, I might be able to get a bit further than I've made it right now. But I'll put the camera down right now and I'll have a little bit of a go at it, and I'll show you what that looks like. So as you can see, we are not going to get very far up this trail. For reference, that was low range 4th gear with both diff locks on, and I don't feel the need to just keep bashing into this and trying to get higher and higher. I mean, it's going to be cold for camping, so let's drive down a bit and I'll find a nice place to camp, and then I'll show you guys my whole cooking setup. All right guys, it's a bit later on. I drove down and found this wicked place to camp. The sun has just gone down, so I'm going to have to hurry to cook dinner in time. But I thought you guys might want to see. I just wandered around, found this great pile of bear poop. I'm going to say black bear, and I'm going to say not super fresh, but also not super old. So I wonder if I'm camping in a spot where he likes to walk through. It'd be something to listen for tonight. So here I am. I've just pulled up at camp. I mean, I popped the roof, and so that's all I've done. I haven't prepared anything because I want to show you guys what it looks like. Obviously I'm wearing the GoPro on my head. Luckily there's no one around except you guys to see how stupid I look. So I'm going to go through and cook dinner now, a really typical dinner that I cook when I'm on the road in Latin America or Africa. And I'll talk you through my whole setup and show you what's what as we go. So first things first, the Wrangler. I mean, it has this tailgate. So from day one, I knew that I'd have a tailgate table, one of these things. And I just bought this one and it's been brilliant. This is not cheap. This is called the Trailgater from Outback Adventure Products, but it has been brilliant. I've used this 3 times a day for 4 years, and it's been really good. So I'm super happy with it. You can see built-in cutting board. I opted to get the wood one, which I'm really happy with. And then whole platform to cook on. You can see how much I've used it. We'll talk more about that in a minute. First things first, trash bag. I always like to hang this up here off my auxiliary fuel tank, so I have trash nice and handy. And I'm going to cook stir fry with rice, so I need to get the rice happening. Maybe I'll do that right now, and then we'll talk a little bit more about my setup. So let me get out the stove and I'll start on the rice. I keep my stove in this bucket, which you might recognize. This is the bucket I use to fill the water system. I also do my laundry in this bucket, so multi-purpose. And I keep the stove in this old paint can just because that way it's really, durable and can't get hurt getting bashed around. So stove's out and ready. I need a pot. I often find I talk to myself. This is an MSR pot set that I've had for the entire Africa trip. You can see how beat up it is. I have a new handle coming. My friend John is actually sending me one. Thanks, John. And then my rice, I actually store up here in this cabinet. Don't ask me why, it just seems to be a convenient spot. It tucks in kind of in a gap in my cabinets where I've never found a good use for anything else. I actually wrote that on there to stop border guards from hassling me and asking what was in the pot. But in any case, they open it anyway because they really want to see. My organization system has never been brilliant. I have this one big bucket that's mostly food and food items, and then these 2 little ones are spices and cooking things. At times in Africa, I did have another bucket full of food when I knew I was going to be really remote, just because you can't fit enough in here to last, 10 days for 2 people. All right, so the rice is on the way. Hopefully that's not messing with the microphone too much. And so now we can talk a little bit about my whole setup here. Yeah, I always knew this would be my cooking area and that I was going to spend a lot of time here. And I do actually have an awning on the back of the Jeep here. This is the little ARB 1250, and it's been really good in the sun, but the problem with it is it's only as wide as the Jeep. And so when it's out, it does come out past the end here, but it's not wide enough to keep rain out. Once it's windy and the rain comes in sideways, basically there's only a little strip in the middle here that's actually rainproof. So I'm kind of thinking about getting one of those 270 wraparound awnings, but at the same time, I don't love them because they're so heavy. So I go back and forward on that, and I'm not sure what I'm gonna do just yet. So a little bit more about my setup here. I actually installed this tailgate table and I used it for maybe about a week before I even got the pop-up roof, before the Jeep was finished. And initially, I had all of these cutlery items just in Tupperwares here in my cabinets. And so when I was cooking, when I was cutting up vegetables, straight away I realized I just had to constantly get into this Tupperware and back again. And this Tupperware was just taking up space in here. And one of our big challenges as Overlanders is that we never have enough space. We're always gonna run low on storage space. So I started thinking, can I store my cutlery in a more convenient location? And actually, I copied the idea from friends of mine. And when this tailgate table's closed, there's about an inch of space here where I realized I could store all of my things. So how did I make it? This is just a piece of melamine that I got from a friend because he had it left over. Any kind of thin material would work, maybe a piece of plastic, a small piece of plywood or something. I cut it to shape, and actually it's just using the mounting screws that the tailgate table itself uses. So I didn't have to do anything fancy there. And all I did was laid out all of the cutlery that I wanted to bring. And obviously I used to have more taking up some of these other gaps. I had a cheese grater at one point, decided I didn't need it, so I threw that away. But anyway, I laid out all of the items and I kind of got an idea of where they were all gonna be. I marked where I needed to drill holes. And these are actually pop rivets that I put through with washers on them, holding this elastic strapping. And then each item just tucks into the elastic strap. And this has actually worked really well. I like it a lot. You can see my elastic is starting to not be so stretchy anymore. This is 4 years of constant use. It would be really easy for me to just take this off and, put new strapping on there. So, maybe I'll do that if I can be bothered. But yeah, this has been really great to just keep all of my cutlery right here where I need it. Doesn't take up valuable space and saves me time while I'm cooking. So if you've got a tailgate table, this is a really nifty thing to add. So when I drove from Alaska to Argentina, I didn't have a fridge, I didn't have a good cooking setup. And to be honest, I ate really terrible food. I was eating ramen noodles most days for lunch. For dinner, I would have like a tin of soup, which were always full of salt. And so one of the things I dreamed about if I was ever gonna go on a big overland expedition again was that I wanted a better cooking setup so that I could eat better quality food. And so a big part of that is the ability to have fresh vegetables and meat, of course. And so that entails a fridge. And so for me, I have a Dometic 35 litre fridge here mounted kind of as part of my cabinet system. And I did this, I tried to keep it flat so that you could sit on it, or when I make this rear area a bed, you could actually sleep on top of this. As you can see, it didn't actually turn out perfectly flat. That's because of my skills of construction are not good enough. But you know what? It has been good enough. So that's all that matters. We've got Sid the sloth hanging here too, by the way. Say hi to Sid. So 35 litre fridge. This thing has been fantastic. I can't imagine ever doing an overland trip without a fridge again. It has changed the food that I eat that much. And it makes me that much happier because I get to eat really great food, for 3 meals a day. So my personal opinion is that I would never go overlanding without a fridge. Obviously everybody makes their own choice there, and I'm not trying to tell you you have to have a fridge, but go out on the weekends without a fridge and see what you think. See if you care about eating ramen and tin soup, or if you don't care, then you don't need a fridge and you can save the money. So people always ask, what kind of food did I eat while I was on the road? And I kind of fell into a bit of a habit that worked really well for me. Obviously, you have to come up with what works for you. So this is just what worked for me. I'll explain it to you. What I found was I was often camping somewhere remote, just like this. So in the mornings, I always wanted to boil a coffee for sure, which meant once the stove was hot, it only took a few more minutes to make breakfast. And for me, I love eating a big breakfast. I like to eat. And I kind of fell into the routine of having egg wraps for breakfast. So a couple of eggs, some tomatoes, some lettuce, hopefully some mustard if I can find it. And those things are really easy to find at street markets all over the world. And here's some footage of what a street market looks like. This is me wandering through one in Mali. And this one's a little bit thin, I would say. Typically they have, an abundance of fresh vegetables. So things like tomatoes, carrots, bell peppers, potatoes. Every street market has those in abundance. You will never have a problem buying those things. And then I would always keep my eyes out for things that I really enjoy, like lettuce, or I would buy lots of tropical things like watermelons, papayas, mangoes. When you're near the equator, whoop, there's my rice boiling over. When you're near the equator, those things are really common and really cheap. So I ate a lot of those either at breakfast or later on in the day. So yeah, that was breakfast for me. Oftentimes I would end up driving near a village for lunch, and I realized in about Central America somewhere that buying street food costs about the same as making my own food. The difference is that street food is way more delicious than I can cook. So right then I decided that when I have the chance, I'm always going to buy street food. It means I get to chat to locals, I really get a feel for the country, and get to banter a little bit, learn some of the local language, or practice my bad French or Spanish. So yeah, I often buy lunch. If I don't buy lunch, there goes the rice again. When I don't buy lunch, I often have avocado on bread. Bread's really common and really easy to get, especially in French colonies where they have delicious baguettes, which is pretty much all of West Africa. And then for dinner, partly because I'm saving or trying to save money, and partly because I'm out in the wilderness again, I always like to cook my own dinner. An exception to that is maybe if I'm staying in a city or a town and, I kind of scoped out some street food during the day. It depends how safe I feel, whether I venture out at night to buy street food. I mean, countries like Nicaragua and El Salvador, I did it every single day. Whereas countries like Nigeria, I didn't go out at night. That was just my personal choice, but obviously you make your own decision. So yeah, for dinner then, what did I often cook? I often cooked something just like this. So bell peppers, really common to get. Onions, they're all over the place. Carrots, no problem. And then I would just kind of whatever else I felt like throwing in. Sometimes I threw in cucumber or zucchini if I could find it. Sometimes I would throw in celery. I didn't often find it in Africa, but I did find it a lot in Latin America. Kind of just what's available is what I'll end up throwing in. And at those street markets, it's always no problem to buy rice, to buy beans, to buy pasta. So often I would alternate this stir-fry vegetables with rice, and then the following night I'd have stir-fry vegetables with pasta. They were kind of my two go-tos. I would say I probably had those two 5, maybe even 6 nights a week for most of Africa. So yeah, that's my cooking setup. That's what I'm just about to have for dinner. You're welcome to stick around and watch me dice all of this up. And I hope that answers some questions about, what's available when you're out there in foreign countries. Don't be afraid. Don't imagine that they don't have food or that there's nothing available. Street markets are an amazing way to get to know local people and banter. And I often had the experience, even if there was a language barrier, where I would just hold out a handful of money and the lady would take the right amount of money and often even give me change. And to be honest, for more vegetables, than I need for a meal, it's like 10 cents, maybe 20 cents. So food is extremely cheap in virtually every country. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet is what about meat? And so if I wanted to, I could definitely buy meat at these street markets as well. Usually it's guys on the side of the road and it looks kind of like this photo. And you can see that meat is really nice and red and there are no flies on it. And so I bought that meat and it was delicious. Rule of thumb, if it looks like this, then it's probably okay to buy, and buy it early in the morning. Because the thing to remember is they don't have any refrigeration. So what this means is the animal we're looking at here, it was slaughtered that same day and it's fresh. Because if it had been slaughtered the day before, by now it would already be kind of brown and it would be covered in flies. So whenever I saw meat like that, or whenever it was late in a hot afternoon, I never bought any meat. But early in the morning, when it looked fresh, I probably bought meat like twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. And often the street food I was eating for lunch was either goat or beef or chicken. So I was getting my meat at lunch, not always putting it in my meals at dinner. And on that, when you're buying meat on the side of the road, really commonly it's going to be beef or goat, and chicken is available too. I didn't usually buy raw chicken. I guess I shy away from that a little bit, sanitary stuff. So I didn't cook it myself, but I definitely would buy it when it was available as street food. Fish is really common as well, obviously if you're near the ocean or a lake. So again, I mean, there is a lot of options. Don't imagine that you're gonna starve. And of course, keep in mind, street food is absolutely delicious, sometimes extremely spicy, but always varied, always interesting. And so my advice is make sure you sample as much street food as you can wherever you're going around the world. So I might give you guys a little bit of a time lapse now. I am going to cut up some vegetables really quickly and then get frying on dinner.
So a couple of things I forgot to mention. As well as street markets where you're going to find all of your fresh fruit and vegetables, pretty much every country has a supermarket, or at least a local version of a supermarket. And so in there, you're going to find things like ketchup, and you'll notice I add a tin of corn. Towards the end, I add soy sauce. Cooking oil is absolutely abundant all over the world, usually vegetable oil. So really basic things like that, you're not going to have a problem finding and buying really no matter where you go in the world. Even when I was in the DRC, the Congo, those things were absolutely for sale.
All right, so there you have it. Veggie stir fry for dinner with rice. You could call it fried rice. I hope you've enjoyed this tour of my cooking setup. You're going to notice that everything is just simple and it works. That became a real motto of mine when I built this vehicle, and then for the 3 years in Africa, it really worked to my advantage. So I don't have fancy things, I don't have complicated things, but I have things that are battle tested and I know they work really well. So when I'm out here, or one day if I ever take this thing, to some faraway continent, I know the setup's going to work. Keep that in mind when you're building your own vehicle, and make sure you get out there and use it and see what works for you. So yeah, thanks for joining me. Bon appetit. Hope you enjoy your dinner. And if you've enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. Everything helps. So see ya.